thanks for tuning in. I'm Larry Tritel, and welcome to Larry's Music Stories. This is the story of one of the Rolling Stones' most loved songs, Angie. The song was written by Mick Jagger and Keith Richards and released in 1973 on the album Goat's Head Soup. The track was recorded at Dynamic Sounds Studio in Kingston, Jamaica. Nicky Hopkins plays piano on the track, and both Keith Richards and Mick Taylor play acoustic guitar. Bill Wyman is on bass and Charlie Watts on the drums. This much-loved song went to number 5 in the UK and all the way up to number 1 in the USA, Canada, Australia, Belgium, France, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, and Switzerland. Jagger said about the song, "People began to say the song was written about David Bowie's wife, but the truth is Keith wrote the title, and I think it has to do with his daughter Angela, and then I just wrote the rest of it." And Keith Richards said about it, "While I was in rehab in Switzerland, Anita was down the road having our daughter Angela. I had a guitar with me, and I wrote Angie in the afternoon, sitting in bed, because I could finally move my fingers and put them in the right place again. It was not about any particular person. It was a name like, Diana. I didn't know my daughter was going to be called Angela when I wrote Angie. But I'm glad she was called Angela because Anita had adorned her with all these really weird names like Dandelion. So she's Angie now, strangely enough." How great is that? I hope you enjoyed this story. Till next time, remember what the great Ian Anderson said, "Life's a long song, but the tune ends too soon for us all." Hello, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Larry Tritel, and welcome to Larry's Music Stories. This is the story of a much-loved song by the Rolling Stones, 19th Nervous Breakdown. The song was written by Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, and the single was released in 1966. It became a hit all over the world, and it went up to number 1 in Germany and the UK. Guitarist Brian Jones had borrowed the song's guitar riff from the Bo Diddley song, Diddley Daddy. Mick Jagger tells this story. "We had just done 5 weeks of hectic work in the States, and I said, 'Don't know about you blokes, but I feel about ready for my 19th nervous breakdown.' Well, we seized on it at once as a likely song title. Then Keith and I worked on the number at intervals during the rest of the tour." Jagger went on to say, "It's just a song about a neurotic bird, that's all. And it's a bit of a joke song, really. I mean, the idea that anyone could be offended by it really is funny. But I remember some people were. It's very hard to put yourself back in that period now. Popular songs didn't really address anything very much. But a couple years after that, things took a turn. But those were very innocent days." How great is that? I hope you enjoyed this story. Till next time, remember what the great Ian Anderson said, "Life's a long song, but the tune ends too soon for us all." Hello, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Larry Tritel, and welcome to Larry's Music Stories. This is the story of a rock and roll classic by the Rolling Stones, Honky Tonk Women. This great tune was written by Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. The single was released in 1969 on the 4th of July. Richards said about it, "The guitar is in open G tuning on that. I learned that particular tuning off Ry Cooder. The song started in Brazil. We were in Mato Grosso and living on this ranch. Mick and I were sitting in the middle of nowhere with all these horses in a place where if you flushed the john, all these black frogs would fly out. And I started to play, basically fooling around with an old Hank Williams idea. This was the first track the guitarist Mick Taylor, who had replaced Brian Jones, played on with the band." And Keith said about it, "The song was originally written as a country song, and it got turned around to this other thing by Mick Taylor, who got into a completely different feel." Taylor went on to say, "They had already laid down the backing track, but it was very rough and incomplete. I added some guitars to it, but I didn't play the riffs that started. That's Keith playing. I played the country kind of licks between the verses." The song's iconic opening cowbell was played by producer Jimmy Miller. This much-loved song went to number 1 in Australia, Denmark, Ireland, New Zealand, Switzerland, the UK, and the USA. How great is that? I hope you enjoyed this story. Till next time, remember what the great Ian Anderson said, "Life's a long song, but the tune ends too soon for us all." Hello, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Larry Tritell, and welcome to Great Music Stories. This is the story of a gigantic hit song by the Rolling Stones, "I Can't Get No Satisfaction." The song was written by Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, and the single was released in 1965. Richards woke up in the middle of the night and came up with the iconic guitar part and just the words, "I can't get no satisfaction." He recorded it on a Philips portable tape recorder and went back to sleep. In the morning when he played the tape back, he heard the riff and the words, and then as Keith says, "It's me snoring for the next 40 minutes. Jagger wrote the remaining words after a gig in Clearwater, Florida, while he sat by a swimming pool. Keith used a Maestro FZ1 fuzz tone on this track, and by the end of 1965, the FZ1 pedal was completely sold out across the country. Jagger said about this classic, "It had all the ingredients. It has a very catchy title, a very catchy guitar riff, and a great guitar sound." Keith played a 1959 Les Paul standard guitar, plugged into his Maestro pedal, and then into a Fender Showman amp on this historic track. This song went to number 1 in Australia, Austria, Finland, Germany, Ireland, the Netherlands, Norway, South Africa, Sweden, the UK, and the USA. How great is that? I hope you enjoyed this story. Till next time, remember what the great Ian Anderson said, "Life's a long song, but the tune ends too soon for us all." Hello, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Larry Tritell, and welcome to Great Music Stories. This is the story of one of the greatest songs in rock history, Gimme Shelter by the Rolling Stones. The song was written by Mick Jagger and Keith Richards and released on the album Let It Bleed in 1969. Keyboard ace Nicky Hopkins plays piano on the track. Richards has said he was feeling jealous when he came up with the song's opening guitar part. His girlfriend was away with lead singer Mick Jagger filming a movie together. He has also said about the song, "I had been sitting by the window of my friend's apartment in London with an acoustic guitar when suddenly the sky went completely black and an incredible monsoon came down. It was just people running and looking for shelter, and that was the germ of the idea." The song later developed into more of a political statement about war, violence, and unrest. The song's producer, Jimmy Miller, thought the song needed a female vocalist on it, so in the middle of the night they called gospel singer Mary Clayton, who came in her pajamas with rollers in her hair and laid down those amazing vocals. The song has become one of the highlights during a Rolling Stones live show. Film director Martin Scorsese has used this classic tune in 3 of his films. While recording the song, the band used old, battered Triumph amplifiers to get the sound they were after, and Keith Richards played a Maton SE777, which was the same hollow body guitar he had used on the song Midnight Rambler. Keith said in an interview, "On the very last note of Gimme Shelter, the whole neck fell off." How great is that? I hope you enjoyed this story. Till next time, remember what the great Ian Anderson said, "Life's a long song, but the tune ends too soon for us all." Hello, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Larry Tritell, and welcome to Great Music Stories. This is the story of one of the Rolling Stones' finest songs, Ruby Tuesday. The song was written by Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, and it was released in 1967 on the album Between the Buttons. This great track was recorded at Olympic Studios in London. Keith's girlfriend at the time, Linda Keith, had just left him, and he said about it, "Basically, Linda is Ruby Tuesday." That's the first time I felt the deep cut. The thing about being a songwriter is you can find consolation in writing about it and pouring it out. Brian Jones plays a very memorable recorder part on this song, and Mick Jagger's girlfriend at the time, Marianne Faithfull, said about it, "Brian very softly played a folkish nursery rhyme melody on the recorder, and it caught Keith's attention. He cocked his head. 'What's that thing you just played, man, on the recorder? Can you do it again?' And engineer Eddie Kramer said about Brian's use of the recorder on the track, "I was amazed when he played those melodies, both by the way he thought to use it and the way he played this thing. Mick and Keith, not to put them down, would never have thought of something like that." This great tune went to number 2 in Australia and Canada, and it made it up to number 1 in the USA. Fun fact, the upright bass that appears on the track was played by both Bill Wyman and Keith Richards at the same time. Richards played the bass with a bow while Wyman fingered the notes. How great is that? I hope you enjoyed this story. Till next time, remember what the great Ian Anderson said, "Life's a long song, but the tune ends too soon for us all." Hello, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Larry Tridell, and welcome to Larry's Music Stories. This is the story of a rock and roll classic song, You Can't Always Get What You Want by the Rolling Stones. This great tune was written by Mick Jagger and Keith Richards and released in 1969 on the album Let It Bleed. The highest it reached on the charts was number 4 in Belgium. Mick said about the song, "It was something I just played on the acoustic guitar, one of those bedroom songs, and it proved to be quite difficult to record because Charlie couldn't play the groove, and so Jimmy Miller had to play the drums. And I also had this idea of having a choir on the track. Somebody said we could get the London Bach Choir, and we said that'll be a laugh." The Chelsea drugstore in this song was on the corner of Royal Avenue and Kings Road, and some of what you could find inside included a bar, a pharmacy, a newsstand, and a record store. The omnipresent Al Cooper plays piano, organ, and French horn on this great track. Jagger goes on to say, "It's got a very sing-along chorus and people can identify with it. It's got a very good melody and orchestral touches, so it's got all the ingredients, and no one always gets what they want." Keith Richards hasn't talked much about his acoustic guitar sound on the track, but guitarist John McLennan studied it and had this to say, "Many people say it's an open E with a capo on the 8th fret. Another theory is that the guitar is tuned to open G. Until Keith clears this up, no one is 100% certain." Fun fact, the London Bach Choir who sing on the track wanted their name removed from the album when they found out the title was Let It Bleed, and it had a song Midnight Rambler about a serial killer. How great is that? I hope you enjoyed this story. Till next time, remember what the great Ian Anderson said, "Life's a long song, but the tune ends too soon for us all." Hello, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Larry Tridell, and welcome to Larry's Music Stories. This is the story of a great song by the Rolling Stones, Under My Thumb. The song was written by Mick Jagger and Keith Richards and was released in 1966 on the album Aftermath. The song is thought to be written about the difficulties Jagger and his then-girlfriend Chrissy Shrimpton were dealing with. When some feminist groups found this song offensive, Jagger said, "It's a bit of a jokey number, really. It's not an anti-feminist song. The idea was that I was under her and she was kicking me around. So the whole idea is absurd. And it's in reply to a girl who was a very pushy woman." Brian Jones plays a Mexican marimba on the track that happened to be left behind in the recording studio, and it added a tremendous amount to the song. Richards said about it, "Brian was so versatile. He added all of that color, those other instruments and ideas. He was an incredibly inventive musician." The track includes a bass guitar played through a fuzz pedal and also features Ian Stewart on piano. Jagger said about Stewart, "He really helped this band swing. Stu was the one guy we tried to please. We wanted his approval when we were writing or rehearsing a song." Fun fact, the band's manager, Andrew Loog Oldham, was going to call the Aftermath album Could You Walk on Water, and he even announced that to the press. The band wasn't happy about it, and Decca Records had to issue a statement saying they would not put out any album with such a title at any price. How great is that? I hope you enjoyed this story. Till next time, remember what the great Ian Anderson said, "Life's a long song, but the tune ends too soon for us all. Hello, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Larry Tritell, and welcome to Larry's Music Stories. This is the story of a rock and roll classic song, Brown Sugar, by the Rolling Stones. The song was written by Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, and it was released in 1971 on the Sticky Fingers album. It went up to number 2 in the UK and Ireland, and it hit number 1 in Canada, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and the USA. Mick's girlfriend at the time was Marcia Hunt. She claims the song was written about her. Backup singer Claudia Lanier, however, says the song was written about her, and she was the one dating Jagger when it was written. Bill Wyman has stated in his book that it's partially about Lanier, but the song was about more than that, and Jagger said, "The lyric has all to do with the dual combination of drugs and girls. This song is a very instant thing, a definite high point." The track features a great vocal by Jagger with the exceptional guitar work of Keith Richards and Mick Taylor. Keeping it all steady is Bill Wyman on bass and Charlie Watts on drums. The always tasty Ian Stewart is on the piano, and the iconic tenor sax playing is by the legendary Bobby Keys. This track was recorded at the famous Muscle Shoals Sound Studio, and Jagger went on to say, "It's such a mishmash, all the nasty subjects in one go. I would never write a song like that now. I'd probably censor myself." How great is that? I hope you enjoyed this story. Till next time, remember what the great Ian Anderson said, "Life's a long song, but the tune ends too soon for us all." Hello, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Larry Tritell, and welcome to Larry's Music Stories. This is the story of a classic song by the Rolling Stones, Painted Black. The song was written by Mick Jagger and Keith Richards and released in 1966 on the album Aftermath. It became a top 5 hit all over the world. Richards wrote the melody and Jagger composed the lyrics while the Stones were on tour in Australia. Mick said about it, "Our songs were taking on some kind of edge in the lyrics, cynical, nasty, skeptical, and rude. It fit with the kids' disenchantment with the grown-up world." According to the song's producer, Andrew Loog Oldham, the song was taking forever to put together, and he said about it, "That song was going nowhere, and in another 10 minutes it would have been time to move on." Bassist Bill Wyman plays a fretless bass on the track, and he said, "I suggested we add Hammond organ pedals, and I laid on the floor under the organ and played a second bass riff on the pedals with my fists." That exotic sound was brought out even more by Brian Jones, who played sitar on the track, and Jones had this to say, "I love the sitar. It gives you a new range. It has completely different principles from the guitar." And Keith Richards added, "To get the right sound on Painted Black, we found the sitar fit perfectly. But what made Painted Black was Bill Wyman on the organ, because it didn't sound anything like the finished record until Bill said, 'You go like this.'" How great is that? I hope you enjoyed this story, Till next time, remember what the great Ian Anderson said. Life's a long song, but the tune ends too soon for us all. Hello, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Larry Tritell, and welcome to Larry's Music Stories. This is the story of another great song by the Rolling Stones, Mother's Little Helper. The song was written by Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, and the single was released in 1966. When this song was written, tranquilizers like Valium were being heavily prescribed at the time. Mick Jagger said about it, "It's about drug dependence, but in a sort of spoofy way. It was just everyday stuff that I'd observe and write about, but there's also a lot of humor in those songs. People say I'm always singing about pills and breakdowns, therefore I must be an addict. That's ridiculous. Some people are so narrow-minded they won't admit to themselves that this really does happen to other people besides pop stars." And Keith Richards had this to say, "The strange guitar sound is a 12-string with a slide on it. The track just needed something to make it twang. I wanted to add some nice bite to it, and it was just one of those things where someone walked in with a no-name electric 12-string. Then we had a riff that tied the whole thing together. I played an acoustic guitar as well." And drummer Charlie Watts said about the song, "We've often tried to perform Mother's Little Helper, and it's never been any good. It never gelled for some reason. It's either me not playing it right or Keith not wanting to do it like that. It's just one of those songs. We used to try it live, but it's a bloody hard record to play." How great is that? I hope you enjoyed this story. Till next time, remember what the great Ian Anderson said. Life's a long song, but the tune ends too soon for us all. Hello, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Larry Tritell, and welcome to Larry's Music Stories. Today's story is about a great song by the Rolling Stones, It's All Over Now. It was written by Bobby Womack, along with his sister-in-law, Shirley Womack. A recording by Womack's group, the Valentinos, was released in 1964. The Valentinos recording reached number 94 on Billboard's Hot 100. This song came to the attention of the Rolling Stones in June of 1964, when popular disc jockey Murray the K gave them a copy of the Valentinos record and said, "I think this will be a good song for you guys." The Stones recorded the song about a week later, and it was in the record stores about 3 weeks later. Keith Richards had this to say, "We cut that song in Chess Studios. American studios at the time were so much more together than the ones in England." For some reason, Bobby Womack was not happy that the Rolling Stones wanted to record his song, and he even told Mick Jagger, "Hey, why don't you just record your own song?" But Womack's friend, the great Sam Cooke, told him, "It'll be good for you financially." And when Bobby Womack got his first royalty check for this song, he said, "You know what? I've had a change of heart. Mick Jagger can have any song of mine he wants. How great is that? I hope you enjoyed this story. Till next time, remember what the great Ian Anderson said. Life's a long song, but the tune ends too soon for us all.